connected with the taboo and changing your reality. It makes sense that, think about a plant in the garden. If it's had too much soil piled on it, maybe it's been exposed to the elements, so we've put too much on, but there's a lot of really good healthy nutrients underneath the surface, lots of soil on top. Yes, it probably will sprout through the soil at some point, but if you release that taboo to the sunshine, you release those roots, you release the good healthy nutrients, you let them be seen and felt, even in an environment where it might be windy, it might blow over, but you nurture it, you care for it. You let them be expressed in a healthy way around the right community, the right garden. That plant's going to thrive. It's going to go more than survive. It will expand out. And yes, the extra soil, the resistance, the challenges, they will cause it to grow. It will go beyond perhaps the norm. It finds other shoots to push through the surface, but eventually gets to a point where things don't have to be so hard anymore. I've been talking here on the podcast about the taboo and the withdrawal of attention, and it's funny, my shadow is very much around, for me, having this idea that the masculine is hostile and I must rescue the feminine. So hence when I need to, or not so much a need, the identity will cause me to seek those situations out of my reality. So the loop, the Groundhog Day or the Truman Show loop that plays on repeat in this reality, remember, reality is a reflection of our perception, is I will see that the women being wounded or attractive or needing that male to rescue it. And I can imagine the masculine as hostile, as needing to fight against, as not respecting women. And so that is a loop, like the soil metaphor, that keeps getting piled on the plant. And it piles on the plant because it keeps it in a somewhat of a surface box. And that's not to say it's not necessarily real. If I believe that, I keep getting evidence of it. But the subconscious of fearing both of the men and women, fearing not being there for the women to help protect them, to serve them, or having fearing not letting men be men, and simply just let them have a healthy expression of masculinity, not projecting or perceiving them as hostile. That's the taboo, that it's being hidden. It's actually being masked over by projections. So yes, we can see evidence of this in reality, and we have seen toxic masculinity has been a thing. So that can also restrict the ability to allow those more vulnerable, fertile aspects of the plant, sacred sexuality, conscious manifestation, being in the receiving mode, not forcing fighting, where men and women can both work with that aspect. So the ability to go beyond the limitations present in one's reality, to see them beyond the projections, it's twofold. It's allowing that plant that was been perhaps had too much soil, too much protection and projections on it, let it be seen and felt a little bit more. But part of the let it be felt and seen is being willing to change the loop that's created the projections in the first place. And that's difficult because those projections are tied to the identity. I'm sitting at the moment, and I've got a car parked in front of me, and actually there's a woman who's got a car there, and the RACV's pulled up with the car, and he's now fixing her car. And so that's a healthy form of masculinity, the masculine's coming in and helping support that aspect, And I actually saw that woman here parked opposite me right when I got here. So this is the twofold. I can keep seeing reflections of that in the reality where women are needing to be helped. And it's a taboo for me to say that. It's where women are victimized. Or I'm geared to seeing situations that I can come in and rescue that rescue dynamic. But what ultimately drives that perception for me is I must be getting a trade-off. The nutrients of me as the plant, perhaps I'm getting watered not from a healthy masculinity or a healthy femininity. I get the nutrients of when the shoot comes through and is there for the feminine and protects them against the masculine. So that's a story. That's where I get the nutrients. But what if I can get fed from different aspects of that reality? I can choose a reality where the masculine is not hostile, the feminine is not needed to be rescued, and both the masculine and the feminine can have this interplay together. So it seems strange for me to even to explain that, but it is my challenge, my shadow. And we all have different shadows. And I know with other people on this healing journey, even part of for me wanting to share with this, when I started creating content, I knew I had something to say of value. But partly I also wanted validation. I needed validation to support what I was creating. And that wasn't necessarily wrong. When we create something, the RACV guy here, RACQ, person who's fixing the car, he's an employee who's paid to support the woman who's getting her car fixed. He's not doing it for nothing, pardon me. So, and she would also have a membership that pays the service for them to fix the car. But when we have emotional and relationship dynamics where we're geared to give away our own power or play out a victim story so that we need to keep attracting energy from somewhat of a deficient state, it doesn't actually support sovereignty of both the masculine and the feminine. The masculine, from a frequency perspective, does support the feminine. But ultimately, for me, personally, that is within me. The masculine is perhaps the choices I make, the words I use, the identity and form I can construct that allows the feminine, the voice, the creativity to be expressed. So even when I'm sharing, I want to get myself into an authentic frequency that connects with people that this will resonate with. But what can dilute that message or kind of subvert it, like the player perspective, is if I'm trying to create something not from a place of authenticity, but from a place of needing to actually get something where it's not on a place of sovereignty. I think and I feel Esther Hicks talks about this. Words don't necessarily teach, do they? You know, they teach initially. If we're very much geared to words or thoughts and content, you know, we might have to read something or feel something or hear something over and over or see something play out, and then we can learn or we can apply it. And this is where this will relate. But more accurately, it's energy. We feel when there's an energetic pull on our attention, don't we? But our identity might have difficulty not defaulting back to the way we actually used to attract energy. For me, in my environment, I perhaps got an exchange out of supporting the feminine by going up against the masculine. And so that supported my energetic input, you know? And that's just from a relationship perspective. But if I have that geared in my frequency, that law of attraction, that's how I continue seeing reality. And so my shadow would integrate my ability to receive beyond duality from a more unconditional, high conscious perspective is I need to stop seeing people as either victims or enemies, and as me, the hero perpetrator who's trying to fix people. So that's when we're going with a 5-dimensional, high-dimensional perspective of reality, where we can see reality, we can see the people, but we're not trying to fix them. And the only way for me, who is so geared, who is so attuned to directing my attention outwards, trying to fix everything, is to hold it within. Is to hold the energy within. And it's difficult, you know. It's difficult for the person who I obviously I've talked a lot about Uber driving. When I drive, I don't have the radio on unless people request it. So it's very much about working with silence. It's a sacred space. And I was partly inspired by that because of the power of silence of Carlos Castaneda and the shamanic tradition, of actually spaciousness that comes from being with our thoughts, being with our energy. It's so, but this is the challenge, isn't it? When there's no one to talk to, when there's no one to direct out, we can still see the world going around. But, when we have to be with ourselves, it's often the tendency is to go towards our phone, isn't it? Because we can't feel like we can just be in our body. And this is the great distraction, that it's not from a victim or a hero or anything space, and that's where I've probably perhaps been in the past, even sharing content. It's not to convert or rescue or save or shame. It's from my own perspective is, it's like we're defaulted to direct our energy out, connected with our phone. So when we stop touching the phone, we have to be present with the energy. And that's difficult because we're so geared to give our attention away. So that's where it's helpful to be curious with that. And it's the same thing with the plant metaphor earlier. The plant that has so much soil put on it, it's really struggling to breathe, and it's only looking for those certain shoots. From a strange space, that cocoon can be helpful initially because it's actually it has to find other ways to thrive and survive. But then it does. Eventually, it can receive sunlight because it starts to release some of those limiting things that were actually constricting it. And this is the mystery that comes forward from that. That the plant is ultimately creating its own resistance. It's creating the excess. We create these difficulties because of how we see reality. My shadow of wanting to see things or being so attached to the external, like the person on the phone, is because it's somewhat of a trauma response. I couldn't feel safe in my body unless people around me were safe. So it's like a hypervigilance, which is where inner child healing comes to a space and there might be addiction recovery. Where this is a common thing. A lot of people experience this in reality, but we don't necessarily name it, and that's that taboo, because we don't want to shame anyone. And it's not really the shaming an external other. It's actually just teaching us means to become more aware of our energy internally. So this is the thing. The more we tend to our inner garden, our inner plant, a plant that might have had a lot of the soil on it, but can receive direct sunlight through not being so distracted, so addicted to the external, just going inward, fertilizing that energy within of worthiness, of safety within. And I'm not saying that's an easy thing. Like, I play a lot of vibrational music, root chakra music, sacral chakra music. I live here in the mountains where I'm away from a lot of my old relationships and friendships, I do at times live a very insular lifestyle. But all of it's been geared to me a little bit like the plant, where I've had a lot of soil on me for ages, but because my default was from a trauma response to direct my attention outwards, I needed to go into a space where like a cave. I needed to be in a space where I could find my energy within my tribe, find my people, so that once I begin shooting through the ground, once I find that abundance, which I have been, I'm not geared to just giving it away by looking for situations to reinforce an external sense of self through victim rescuing and enemy finding. A three-dimensional good bad perspective of reality where our worth is always external. So that's the practice, if you've come to this today, that I would recommend, and it's something I'm working with. I can see them, and I'm recording this in public where there's a lot more people around than when I'm used to at the house. But I'm on the road all day when I do Uber driving, or I'm on the Gold Coast. It's really about having focus around outcomes will drive behaviors. So if when we have a goal, or Neville Goddard would talk about this law of assumption. If you are moving towards a goal, whether it's a home, whether it's just a healthy, happy, grounded person, it's not so much doing all things to get to that goal. If you imagine and feel as if you're already that person, if you're already feeling that, the behaviors will align with that, because all reality is geared to how we perceive ourselves. So rather than keep seeing ourselves as the rescuer or victim or enemy for me, because it plays on the same loop. It's healthy for me to just see myself as worthy, that I'm not better or worse than anyone else. Because that's the thing, when we see ourselves as better, we're also fearing that we might become worse. If we feel we're less than, we're therefore, we're kind of attached to, well, there must be a better than. It's a duality perspective. And it actually stops us from expressing that taboo, because we're afraid of going up and down the scale. But if we recognize that we're all sovereign, we're all energetically full, whole, and complete, it becomes more of the dance. Life is more of the dance, a game, a play. And because there's less of a heaviness to it. And that doesn't mean the identity that we've created, or the goal, or the vision, or the assumption of what Neville's talking about won't draw that outcome. But what we can do is just assume that we're already worthy. Because we assume we're not actually missing anything. We don't feel separate from our desires, because our desires and our sense of worthiness and is already within. Thanks again for being a part of this. Bye for now.